Welcome back to the Micro Advice Podcast. Today, our spotlight topic is on time to value in data management. We'll talk a little bit about what it is and how this could impact a very superior customer experience. To better understand this concept, we're here with founder and CEO of Airbyte, Michel Tricot. Airbyte is a new open source ETL standard for replicating data from applications, APIs, and databases to create usable information for the entire organization. Michel, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you, Jim, for having me on this very special day.
Michel, that's right. It seems like you are really onto a hot product here. After only 5 months with Airbyte, you raised, 5.2 million in seed funding. And then just 2 months later, I noticed this just today, 26 million in Series A with Benchmark. That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And also I've seen you have over 600 or 700 companies start using Airbyte already after being really in business for only a few months. So this is fantastic. You're really on a roll. So I guess to learn a little bit more about the need or challenge that you're building Airbyte around, can you talk about that and how that impacts your customers?
Yeah. So I've been working in data for since I started my career in 2007. And what I've seen across every single company that I've been at is every organization is trying to solve the same problem over and over again at different scales with different type of data, but they're always trying to solve the same problem, which is I have data, it is somewhere, it is siloed. How do I bring it into one centralized place so that I can start have the complete vision of my data and have the most complete analysis that I can do with that data? And what we've seen actually, and that's something we spent a lot of time with my co-founder before we started to build Airbyte, is spend a lot of time talking to companies that were buying existing solutions on the market to do this to solve this data integration problem. And we've seen that 100% of them were both buying a solution, but also rebuilding the solution on the side. And at that point, we said, okay, why are none of the existing solutions able to fulfill the needs of this company? And it's just that data is so all over the place, so different, so specific to your organization that it is not possible for a single company to actually solve that problem for everybody. You have to have your own custom logic, your own custom connectors, et cetera, et cetera. And that is what we're solving with Airbyte, which is instead of forcing a solution, we're creating an open platform an open and modern platform where people can actually bring their own knowledge and bring their own connectors to it and start replicating data through Airbyte. And yeah, as you're saying, we had quite a crazy adoption since we started. I think today we have 2,000 companies that have used Airbyte to replicate data, and so that's for itself.
For an organization that's been around really going full steam for less than a year, that is fantastic news. So Michel, can you speak a little bit about what is ETL and how is it used, just to make sure the listeners fully understand in what context we're talking about data management here?
So ETL is the act of taking data from where it is, transforming it and loading it into the place where you're going to leverage that data. And actually with Airbyte, we're kind of re-scrambling the letters a little bit, and we don't call that ETL, we call that E30, in a sense that extract, load, and transform. And the reason why we're doing that is because when you're thinking about transformation of the data, this is where your data analyst, your data scientist is going to inject the business logic into the data. So with transformation, you will start applying your own bias to the data. Whereas if for a product like Airbyte, we only focus on extract and load, these are general purpose actions, meaning that pulling data from a database, whether you're company A or company B, is going to be the same action. Loading data into a data warehouse, whether you're company A or company B, is going to be the same action. And so what we want is to really come up with this huge collection of connectors to extract and load. and then delegate the transformation to an external system so that analysts and people who work with data can actually leverage that data.
That's important. And I've had this discussion with so many different companies that have and collect a lot of data, but turning it into useful information is where the challenge lies. So that's fantastic. You're seemingly working to resolve that. So that actually leads me to my next question, which is around your customer. So I think we understand a little bit about what it is you're doing with Airbyte, but what's the value that your customer should be seeking when using a tool like this for managing their own data and then using it to its fullest capability?
Yeah, like the main value that you get from using Airbyte is you don't have to think about data integration in the end. It's just, it is an enabler for a product. It is an enabler for a use case, but it is not your main purpose as a company. It's just a mean to get to something. And when you're talking to a data analyst, what they want is they just want to have the data. They don't want to know that it comes from Salesforce, it comes from Zendesk, it comes from Google Ads, it comes from my database. They just want to see, okay, I have something, a black box, and now my data is there and I can leverage it. And our goal here is really about how can we build a product that minimizes the time to value so that a person who is not deeply technical with data can start having access to all these different silos of data and have, and you know, like the more data you have together and that you can join together, the better your analysis and the better the insights will be. Because now you can, for example, if you're running analysis on your customers, if you can join that with credit card information, order information, cart information, and behavior information on the website, taking them one by one is going to give you a partial view of this user. But once you bring everything together, you can see the whole journey of your customers. And that's what all these loading and like ingestion tools give you. And that's what we're doing with Airbyte.
Okay, so if I may, a follow-up question on that. It aggregates data from all these different sources that you may already be collecting as a company around your customers. Is there something on top of this platform or tool that allows for visualization so that you can use dashboards and see these different connections and maybe some correlations of how the data is working with or against other data elements?
Yeah. So I think at that point, we need to decompose what we call the modern data stack in three different pieces. The central one is going to be your warehouse. Like it's going to be the piece that you're going to use to do your computation, your analysis. Above, like before the warehouse, you have everything related to data integration, which is how do you get data from all these different sources into your warehouse. And the third part, which is after the warehouse, which is now what kind of tool do I need to show this data and to present that data and to extract insights. And here you have like all the lookers of the world, the DBT of the world, and like the Tableau of the world. These are things that plug onto your warehouse and which your analysts will be able to work with. And it's really like, once you look at data from these three different angles, you see that there are three very different pieces, but they all participate like to what we call like the data value chain. And we focus really on what is before the warehouse. For everything that is after the warehouse, I think we have a very, very mature ecosystem of tools and products, not so much on what is before the warehouse, because there is a huge quantity of places where data can be. And that's why it's very, very hard problem to solve.
Okay, very interesting. That was a great explanation. It helps solidify how this data value chain fits in my vision. But also, I think for the listeners as well, it really helps to solidify where Airbyte comes into play here. So that brings me to another question is some of the customers that we're talking about now, because you had brought up looking at all the different data pieces to develop a better customer experience. What are some of the challenges that you've seen some of the customers in achieving the value that really can be done to solve some of these problems that Airbyte is trying to solve?
The main problem is the fragmentation and the diversity of data sources. This is an immense problem. Now, in terms of, and the thing is, you have this complexity. The question is like, how do you build a system that someone can use and hide that complexity? And at that point, like what the team and at Airbyte is doing is like, how do we properly step up from this complexity and show that as like something that is simpler, like a lot of freedom, but simpler. And what we believe also is that in the data world, like data has been very engineering driven, but with like the new type of data warehouses or new type of data systems, we are able to enable new roles to be very good with data. It can also be like a marketing person who's going to start doing things with data. They don't need to know how the data went into the warehouse. They don't need to know about everything that happened behind the scene, but they also need to be enabled to move that data so they can bring it without having to involve an engineer. And this is like a complexity that we've seen in many organizations where the engineering team, the data engineers are becoming a bottleneck, and they hate that because they want to focus on other things related to data. They don't want to just be building pipes. They want to be focusing on also extracting insight, cleaning up the data, making it nicer, and not just connecting it. And with Airbyte, we're really about like that's a real problem. Like, how do we enable and how do we make people that are less technical autonomous with data?
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is, and this ties into the topic that we've set out to discuss here, which is time to value. So if marketing teams or customer success teams, sales teams are able to do this data management on their own without relying on the engineering teams, is what you're saying is they can get this faster time to value in terms of getting the information they need to get back out in front of their customers with these insights.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
And at the same time that we're serving these new roles with faster access to data and faster time to value, we're doing the same for engineering, which is suddenly their time can be used on things that are more interesting for them. And they can just, the value that they see is I install Airbyte and suddenly I don't have to worry about it. So it's like the time to value is more around like the time saved for them to the maintenance of these connectors and these different data pipelines.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So, Michel, in what you've seen through teams using this and some of your own customers using this, what are some good practices or maybe not so good practices that you've come across when we have non-technical practitioners basically trying to use this and deliver outcomes? Is there anything that you've seen work well or maybe not so well that you'd advise other customers avoid doing?
I would say that don't try to force the transformation too soon. Where, that's the old model of ETL, which is extract, transform, and load, where someone who might not be involved in like all the analytics projects that are going to happen in the organization is going to make a decision on what the data should look like. But the problem is when they do that, they suddenly start changing some fields or some pieces of data, or they are starting to redact some piece of data. But the thing is, this transformation that they're doing is going to work well for like the current use case. The problem is like data is like, it's about discovery. It's just you have access to data and you're going to, yes, do your normal analysis, but you're also going to discover additional signal or additional pattern. And at that point, you might want to dig deeper. And when you start having to dig deeper, when someone has applied this transformation and you don't have access to the original data or like the raw data, then you cannot go deeper and you might be missing important insight. So I think in terms of good practices, it's really about yes, you can do some transformation for like privacy reasons or security reasons, but empower your team to have access to the whole data set, because they will find things that you haven't thought about once they have access to that data. So it's really about, you can be opinionated, but always have this escape hatch where people can just go back to the initial data set. It's also useful for quality, understanding like, why is that dashboard showing me something wrong? Is there something wrong with the transformation? Is there something wrong with the initial data? And having access to this raw data set is going to become very, very important as teams that are consuming data are growing.
Okay, very good. Thank you for explaining that. So final question for today, and turning it right back onto Airbyte. I know it's young, and the way you described it is laser focused on customer experience. So is there one or two things you may have done right from the start in terms of delivering a great customer experience and understanding your customers? And then also, when did you realize you need a customer focused team? At what point of your journey?
Yeah. So we're an open source project. So one thing that we've built in addition to the product and the project is also our community, because we have people today that are contributing to the project, adding new connectors. The people that are using Airbyte initially were also early adopter. So they had issues because, I mean, we write software, so we write bugs. And they would just come onto our Slack community workspace. And a lot of our time as engineers was also used and spent like helping people to ramp up, like understanding, okay, are there patterns of issues happening, or like are there bugs that are recurrent, etc., and try to fix them along with the community. And actually, one thing that we've done recently is we just hire our first, we don't call him like a customer success because we're working with a community. So we call this person like a user success engineer. Mm-hmm. And it's a person whose only goal is to ensure that we are really tracking community issues, whether it's a bug or like something that they don't understand or like a missing feature, and like accompany them on like solving it. And we've set ourselves through some very strict like SLA, I would say, around like how quickly we respond, how quickly we can solve these different problems. But it is almost as important as building the product, because we want to make sure that the people that are using Airbyte are really delighted by the experience. And people are fine having issues with the software as long as they can get the help behind.
Very, very good response. So one actually final question. This customer or user experience engineer, how are they collecting this data for Airbyte among your customers? What are some of the best practices that you've seen work well to identify? Are there any missing gaps, or what can be done better?
Yeah. So in general, what happened is someone will go. I mean, right now we focus mostly on Slack for this type of information. I mean, the whole team also has calls with companies and data teams, but in terms of like how we provide, like we help people actually be successful with Airbyte, everything is on Slack. And it's a lot of asynchronous communication where sometimes it's just a simple question. And then what we do is we dig into understand like the structure of their data organization. We try to understand like what are the connectors that matter to them and what problem they have that is not solved with their current solution. So it's more about interviewing and really identifying all of that. And at the end of every week, we have a report around like what were types of bugs that we saw. Is there a family behind it? What were the type of feature ask that we got? And we collect all of that into GitHub, and people can actually vote on what is the feature that is the most demanded. We also have our own internal prioritization list that we merge with the GitHub one. And that's basically how we try to address like all these different asks and needs from the community and from our users.
That's great. Thanks so much for explaining that. Michel, it has been amazing speaking with you today. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you all for listening. If you have any thoughts on a customer experience topic, please feel free to drop me a line on LinkedIn. As always, if you like this, you can find many more episodes of Micro Advice on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. Thanks again. Have a great week. See you right back here, same place, same time next week. Bye now.